Yep. All right, welcome everybody to the Exit Is Now podcast with me, your host, Scott Snider. So we are live for the first time, debuting our Exit Is Now podcast show. Should be live on LinkedIn and on Facebook. So what that means for us is that you guys can submit your questions to us throughout the podcast. So I'll get your questions here. So if me and Chris are talking about something that you have some deeper dive questions on, I will certainly try to get to those. If you have to dive off or if you've missed the live show, everything will be available to you on Monday on all of your podcast platforms, if you will, right? The Spotifys, the Apples, and the Googles. And I can tell you, Chris, Dad, it is a great day to I guess, air a show live because it's January 11th, so it's Dad's favorite number. And I probably, I was talking to my team before this, I probably couldn't have picked a better time to air a show. I spent 3 days in Florida playing an adult soccer tournament, so if my head's a little red or a little shiny on camera, I certainly got burnt in the 78 degrees in sun, but here we are. So, given it's our first show, I want to talk to you about why, our team and me wanted to start a podcast, and I'll kind of formally introduce Chris, and we'll get into it a little bit. For me, I wanted a podcast that, one, was done live, kind of very authentic feel of who the Sniders are, what exit planning is, and really a look for me, into value acceleration come alive, right? Dad has the book Walking to Destiny, but for me, I really wanted to showcase perhaps my first book someday, which is Growing Up Through the Value Acceleration Methodology. Really, the first year of shows is about us or me as a business owner. For those that might not know me as well or personally, I started my first business at 16 or 17 years old at the seat in my geometry class. I had one job before that. I was a janitor at an all-boys high school. That was a pretty crappy job for sure. And I ended up starting a landscaping company. Did that for maybe, something like 8 years. And in April of 2010, was able to transition out of that business, exit my first company. And then I joined Chris at Aspire Management, his consulting firm, before coming here and buying the Exit Planning Institute with my dad. And kind of flash forward 10, going on 11 years, here we are at the Exit Planning Institute. So today I want to kind of take you on, and I thought it was certainly appropriate for our very first episode to kind of take you guys on a journey, if you will, through what I would say is the evolution of exit planning. There's a few things that come to mind. Dad and I had a big year last year, which we'll certainly get into throughout the show here. 10 years of owning the Exit Planning Institute, and probably something like 20 plus years of doing some type of business together, whether we were directly in business or he was an advisor or maybe sometimes the bank for my ventures. He has always been around as kind of a key advisor and role model for me. This year, two other big things as we're in 2023. Number one, the value acceleration methodology turns 10 years old. Chris certainly invented it before that. We'll talk about that here on the show today. But it was really right out of the gate in 2013, just a few months after buying the Exit Planning Institute, that we said, look, we want to change the curriculum and the approach and put the value acceleration methodology into the curriculum of now what's called the Certified Exit Planning Advisor program or credential. We also celebrate a 10-year anniversary for the State of Owner Readiness research. So this deep research, trying to understand how ready companies are, how attractive they are, and how prepared they are. So if you think about 2022 and 2023, a couple of big years in our family and in our business. And so I thought it would be appropriate for the very first show, right, to have my dad on, not just as the creator of the methodology, but as my business partner, my best friend, certainly my father. And again, what I'm trying to do in the show for everybody, not just this show, but for the series of shows that we'll have, is really take you on a journey through value acceleration, not as an advisor or an educator, but as business owners, and bring people in to talk about really how this all comes together. So certainly many of you tuning in live with us today likely know Chris Snider. He is the CEO formerly of the Exit Planning Institute, the creator of the Value Acceleration Methodology, and the author of our book, certainly Walking to Destiny, which we'll get into. So I wanted to have him come in here because when I think of Chris, outside of being dad and business partner, I think of one of the pioneers, one of these industry titans, if you will, that when we flash another 10 years or another 20 years, he will go down as one of the big pioneers and really the molders, if you will, of this profession, right? When Chris became a SEPA, it was something like 2008. He was like one of the first 100, maybe certificate number 93. And we'll talk about is the industry was new. So kind of let's kind of dive into it. So came up with some questions really around, and I thought the audience, what they don't necessarily get to see, and particularly some of those people that know us well, is who were you when you were pure advisor, right? They know you as educator, head of faculty, creator of the methodology, but I want to start way back and call it 2005, 2006, when you were on the value growth consulting and M&A side, starting Aspire Management, which was your consulting firm. If you know my dad, he's gone from like big Sherwin-Williams down to Price Waterhouse into smaller companies like ours today, helping owners and executive teams grow that company before he transitioned out. So welcome to the show. Thanks for hanging out on our first episode. And let's talk about why Aspire Management. Why come out of the industry, if you will, and what was that like? Why did you start a consulting firm to go kind of direct to owners?
First, I'd like to say congratulations.
Yeah, right? Here we are.
This together and the whole team that's done this. And hello, everybody. Happy 2023. And I'm delighted, honored that I'd be the first guest you have.
Of course.
We want to take a little journey today, right?
We do.
And so, gosh, you go back to 2006 when I started Aspire Management. Actually, it was my second company.
Right.
I started my first consulting company in 2001 when it failed.
Duck Hawk Enterprises, if I remember, right?
Duck Hawk Enterprises was an IT consulting company, and 9/11. Everybody kind of knows 9/11. 2001 was a disaster, a tragedy, and my business went down. At that time as well. Anyway. I went back into industry, for 5 years or so, and a couple of companies applying the methodology. One of the things I was trying to understand is, the stuff that I had learned when I was in big corporate, and especially at Flexalloy, right?
Yeah.
Could you scale those techniques down to companies that were under $10 million? So, the company I joined in 2000, I guess that would have been 2002. Went from $4.5 million in sales to $12.2 million in sales in 3 years.
Okay.
The next company I went to, we went from $2.5 million to $5.5 million in 2 years.
Yep.
And it was kind of at that point I realized, like, this process really works.
And you were running that process for them, for the most part.
Yeah, basically,
you and the team.
I was inside the companies, but
Right.
I was running the value acceleration methodology as we know it today.
Sure.
Within the company as either the COO or the CEO of the company in this small business.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that not only does this stuff work in big corporations, but, you can scale this stuff and make it work in companies that are, $5 to $10 to $20 million as well.
Right.
And I had already sort of decided I wasn't going to go down the corporate track because my last corporate position was CIO.
Right.
So I had made it to C-level executive by the time I was 40. And it's a classic case of somebody realizing, you've set your goal to do this and you climb that tree.
Yeah.
And then you realize, shoot, I climbed the wrong tree. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And mainly what happened is when I worked for Flex and got that experience working in a family business. I mean, I was just fired up. I was so jazzed about that.
Sure.
No way I could go back to the corporate structure at that point. So if you want to make a lot of money, right? There's a couple of ways to do it. One is, you go for the C track.
Okay.
Corporation. The other thing is become an owner. So I said, I already burned that bridge and go on the C track. I know I don't want to do that.
Right.
I got there and I did like it. My route's got to be business ownership. So in 2006, I decided to leave and form my own consulting company, which really it was a management company. The company was called Aspire Management.
Yeah, right.
The intention was that I would buy my own companies, right?
Go out and run them.
And I buy them, improve, grow them, and sell them for myself.
Right.
As I had done for these two tech companies. But what happened is, and anybody that started a business understands this. When you're starting a business, you're not making any money. And so people heard I was on the street, they called and they said, "Hey, look, can you come in and do some consulting while you're looking for something to buy?"
Yeah.
And before about 6 months, I had a full book of business. I was like I had a company.
Right, here we are.
Consulting.
Right. So you get there 2008. Push this mic just a little closer. I guess they're saying we got some people need to hear you. You get there. You're starting at 2006. You run that couple years, doing well. I was talking to you kind of in the pre-show too. So what I think is interesting, right, is what I think a lot of people today see in the Exit Planning Institute that you realized back in 2008 and like to talk about it. You decide now to go into the Exit Planning Institute and earn your credential, which is kind of cool, right? Because it's kind of gutsy because it's a relatively young organization. Exit Planning is kind of being talked about since maybe 2000, 1998. EPI founded in 2005. And in 2008, you say, okay, I want to become a SEPA, and I'm going to be part of these first 100 folks. So what drew you in to the SEPA designation? Back in 2008.
Yeah, the first SEPA was 2007.
Yeah, right. Fall.
I was in the third class, so there weren't even 100 SEPAs at that point.
Right.
And what intrigued me about it is I was already doing exit planning. We didn't call it exit planning in my business.
Sure.
I followed a model called BIGS, B-I-G-S, buy, improve, grow, sell.
I remember that.
The idea was that you'd have this holistic approach of buying a business, improving it, growing it, and then selling it, right?
Yep.
So I was kind of already doing that, and then we had lines of service around each one of those pillars. But what happened is I got an email from a friend of mine out in Arizona. He had been emailed by EPI about this SEPA program, and he had I had been talking to him about this whole holistic process that I was trying to deploy. And he sent it over to me. He said, hey, did you know there's an organization that actually provides a certification for this and a credential? And, I'm like, no, this is what I've been looking for. And What really attracted me to the SEPA program was the three legs of the stool. I was really focused on the business, growing value in businesses.
Yeah, right.
I knew that we were selling businesses, we were growing them.
So you're good on the business side, feel comfortable. And that's what you did almost your entire career.
But anybody that's gone through this process, and of course most of our SEPAs have, it's a challenge. Managing the owner's emotions through this process was really challenging. And what EPI sort of helped me realize is that there's these other two legs of the stool that I'm not even addressing. And maybe because I'm not addressing those, I'm just focused on the business. Maybe that's why my clients are having such a hard time moving through this process.
Moving through the process.
Right?
Let alone maybe on the other side once they exit.
Yeah, and to be honest, I wasn't even concerned about what happened on the other side.
Right, you're on the business side.
I was in the M&A. I was in the business of growing businesses to sell them, and once we sold the business, I was on to the next deal. I can't say that but I could tell you, I'd go back and talk to clients 6 months, 9 months down the road, and they just weren't happy. It's like, how can you not be happy? You got all this money,
right?
So
exactly.
So it was sort of. That's what intrigued me. We talk about intriguing owners, in the SEPA program. Yeah. Well, of course. I was intrigued by this three legs of the stool model, which, was created by Peter Chrisman.
Right. So you come out, so now you got this holistic approach. You're back in your practice. I'm assuming even back then it did the similar things that it does for SEPA today, right? Makes us better connectors, collaborators, and gives us a holistic mindset. What I think was significantly different, though, back in 2008 was the baby boomers were quite a bit younger than they are today, right? And talking about Pete, right, and the $10 trillion opportunity, even back in 2008, they focused on the baby boomer market, right, this $10 trillion of wealth. Yeah. But you come out of SEPA 2008, what's the market like? I mean, certainly no one knows what SEPA is, right? Your certificate at number 3, I don't think they even care. So, but what's it like out there? Now you're a SEPA, Spire Management, you're approaching owners in a new way, but how are they taking to it?
I always told Pete he was ahead of his time. At
Sure,
the time,
naturally.
2008, 15 years ago, the average boomer was in their mid-50s versus today they're 69, I think.
Yeah, average. Like 67, 69.
And the youngest boomers were
super young.
In their late
40s?
Sort of late 40s.
Yeah.
And so Pete and everybody at the time was like, we're going to have this big age wave. The next 10 years, it's going to be all this turnover. But I do think that we misjudged boomers because, we're so much smarter today about understanding psychographics of our clients, of business owners.
Yeah, and the different
At the time, we said, okay, well, they're, half of them are 55 plus. They're all going to want to exit the next 10 years, right? They're going to exit between 55 and 65.
Not a chance.
No.
Not a chance.
That's not the boomers' mindset. That's not. And so we know that we basically had to pry the business from their hands,
Correct.
Because so much of their identity is tied to it. So I think back in those days, we misjudged how quickly things would turn over. But now we're seeing an accelerated, now the boomers are average age 68, 69.
Well, they're kind of prime time, right?
The youngest, I think, is 58, something like that, 59. And in the next 10 years, the youngest goes to like 58, 59, and the average is
here.
In the upper 70. It's here. It's happening right now.
Well, I think, not to kind of go deep into next segments of the show, but it's interesting now when you talk about the baby boomers as they are today versus back then, because you're a boomer and you're maybe in the earlier stages of the baby boomer, like on the maybe younger end. Right. But your mindset has changed too, as you've moved into your 60s versus 10 years ago when you were in your early 50s, right? It's just a totally different mindset, I would assume, for you. It
is. I mean, and you just don't. We always have to talk about this. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Right. You think you know. You think you're going to have all this energy. I can tell you when I turned 60, something changed. I think most people you talk to, they will tell you 60 was more significant than 50 or 40, right?
Right.
There's just something there when you cross that milestone. And, Rich used to show that chart with enthusiasm, and he used to say, at about 60, it starts to fall.
To dip.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And everybody's different, but I can tell you get into your 60s and you do change your perspective. It's one of those things where you just and I say this to younger people all the time, you don't know.
You say it to me all the time, right?
And
you've been right most of the time, right?
Yeah.
I remember telling you, you're like, son, when you hit 30, it's just different. And I'm like, I don't believe that, right? Yeah. And then you hit 30. For me, it was like 32. You're like, oh, man. And now I'm 37. So now I'm sitting here at 37. And I'm like, I think I'm digging on what this guy's talking about, for sure. You just change. Your mindset changes and your body changes. But nonetheless, and your goals and objectives in life change.
Yeah, and that's why I think everybody just matures and you move into a different stage of your life. I mean, look at your situation now, 3 children. Yeah. It's like, you just move. It just changes, and your points of view change, and your personal visions change. It's one of the things that I had to necessarily go down that path, but one of the things I felt was so important in value acceleration methodology and the Prepare Gate is that we be flexible and dynamic, because it's you things don't always go the way you think they're going to go. Most of the time they don't.
Right.
You got to flex for that. And then the other reality is that just as you age and move into different stages of your life, your point of view personally changes,
Yeah.
So you have to be.
Yeah, you always say fast and flexible.
Flex with that and grow with that.
Yeah.
And evolve as a person.
Well, all right, cool. So I think that I wanted to set the stage as we kind of launch in the show. I'm going to take a quick, just 2-minute break. Everybody kind of stick to our LinkedIn and our Facebook. I want you to pile in the questions. We're kind of get those going in our next segment. So give me a quick 2 minutes. Enjoy a cup of coffee, cold beverage, a lunch, whatever you're doing on the other side of that camera.
Walking to Destiny was written to arm business owners and their advisors with the knowledge and understanding needed to recognize their potential, execute growth tactics, and harvest the wealth locked inside a business. Originally written in 2016 by the creator of the Value Acceleration Methodology, Chris Snider, Walking to Destiny 2.0 features a fresh and evolved look into the proven system to maximize value, grow income, and build a business that can be run without you, even if you never plan to leave. Discover how to align your business, personal, and financial goals. Distinguish between your business's attractiveness and readiness to transition. Measure the value of your intangible assets that likely contribute 80% of your company's value. Adopt a process to measure your results every 90 days. Walking to Destiny is the foundation for the Exit Planning Institute's Certified Exit Planning Advisor Credentialing Program. More than 5,000 advisors hold the CEPA designation, the world's leading exit planning credential. Grab your copy of Walking to Destiny 2.0 by visiting www.wtddownloads.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast, hanging out with my dad, my business partner, Chris Snider. We just finished up. If you caught the first segment, I wanted Dad, Chris, to kind of, I always struggle for anybody that's in a family business, right? You always kind of struggle as a dad, as a Chris. I think we're just finishing up talking about how you age and how you have like different perspectives on life. And I could tell you, as I moved in and moved older or gotten older, I think I swing more to dad. I just, whether I don't care whether it's in the family setting. Well, yeah, I'm sure you like it, right? So, anyways, welcome back. So, what I want to do now is kind of segue, right? So, we kind of set up talking about you as the advisor, right? So now we're 2008. Chris had become a CEPA. If you're just tuning in, and now I want to flash forward 4 years to 2012. So now you've been a CEPA 4 years, and we, in October of 2012, you and I team up. This is after I sold my company, hanging out in Aspire Management, learning, growing in that business. But now we want to buy a business together, me and you, and we go to buy EPI in 2012. So what's the motivation from your perspective? What's the motivation in okay, because it's kind of different for you. You change your perspective. You're like, okay, I want to work in primarily Ohio, where we're from, with business owners directly, and you flip your model and you say, okay, I'm going to work with owners a little bit until you eventually stop working with owners entirely, but now I want to teach to advisors and work with advisors. So why the motivation in 2012 to buy EPI?
Well, if I can, I'd like to take a step back.
Sure.
And if you remember, we wanted to buy businesses together. The original model of Aspire Management was buy, improve, grow, sell our businesses, not other people's businesses. Right? I had been doing that, which is for other people, and I wanted to leave and go do that for myself now, right?
Yeah.
And so if you remember, we put a profile together, a buy-side sheet together for our Snider Premier Growth.
We went out.
We looked at healthcare companies. We looked at fitness companies. We looked at a publishing company. We looked at a lot of different companies to buy. All of them were sort of on the theme of around the baby boomers, like, what's going to happen as the baby boomers age. They're going to need health care. They're going to need to stay in shape. Wellness. Sure. We looked at a wellness company.
Yeah, wellness, yeah.
Publishing, we just liked publishing.
We ended up publishing books, right? And a lot of content today.
So, we're looking for stuff we liked, but also stuff that fit the demographic profile over the next 20 years. And then working with EPI, once I got my credential, I think it was 2010, Pete and Rich asked me to be on the board because everybody sort of knows me. I was kind of vocal.
Well, we were involved in EPI.
Doing this, we ought to be doing that. And Rich was like, you got a lot of great ideas. Why don't you come on the board? And the first two things he asked me to do was start a chapter.
Yeah.
Right. And start and launch a national conference, because I kept telling him we need to have a national conference because people go to the CEPA program and then we don't see each other.
No one's tied in.
How are we going to build a community if we never talk to each other after we get our CEPA program?
It's so funny to think about too, though, because this is like obviously way pre-pandemic, right? So it's like we weren't thinking like jump on a live stream, jump on a Zoom call.
We didn't have that then.
Well, I guess, you wouldn't even have it. But I'm saying, I think it was interesting to say there's a couple hundred CEPAs now, right? So now there's a couple hundred CEPAs. But to your point, you kind of leave the CEPA program and never talk. That's a great point.
Yeah. And so Rich was like, those are great ideas. Why don't you be on the board? Go ahead and lead that. So it's kind of like, all right, you think it's such a great idea, take it on and go do it, right?
Yeah.
So we did. and that's what we did. We started the first chapter in 2011, did the first national conference in Fort Lauderdale. I know some of the SEPAs that are still around today that were there. One of them is Sean Hutchinson, who you've got in a couple of weeks.
Yep.
He was there. Craig West was there. Gordon was
Yep.
there, right? So there's a few of us still around. And then, so I was already pretty active. And, Pete approached me and said, hey, Rich and I are thinking about exiting to focus more on our own practices. Is it something you'd be interested in? So took me 3 tries to buy EPI.
Right, I remember that.
Right?
I do remember that.
First, I went in with a group of partners the first time around. And the problem is, anybody that's bought a business, you understand this too, when it comes down to, somebody's got to scratch a check,
Yep, somebody's got to pony up.
Write a check.
Yep.
And the partners that I was with at the time, they wanted to be involved, but they didn't want to scratch a check. They're like, you scratch the check and we'll just be involved. I'm like, that's not going to work. So that fell apart. And then there was another group that came along with some pretty significant folks. They came to me and they say, hey, would you like to be part of our partnership? That due diligence process fell apart.
Of course.
Like a whole year had gone by. Because we were actually going to try to announce something at the 2011 summit.
Yeah, in Fort Lauderdale. Yeah.
We were going to announce that we bought EPI there, but we couldn't put the deal together. And then, so September 2012, I remember when the second deal fell apart, I went to you and I said, we could do this without anybody, but I don't want to do it alone. I need a partner. I need somebody, are you willing to come in and sort of lead the sales effort, lead the operating effort? Because remember, Aspire was still
you're still,
consulting business. I was already busy. I didn't really have, and so I really, you looked at me and said, yeah, let's do it. And in fact, not only did you say, let's do it, if you remember, you said to me, let's get on a plane, fly up to Chicago, meet with Rich, and put this deal together. And that's
Rich was kind of a tough dude, man. He was like an attorney, and remember they're both M&A guys, an accountant too. Yeah. So we're dealing with one of the EPI partners, right? Who you may remember, Rich Jackham, attorney, CPA, and M&A guy. Yeah. And what I remember of the deal, and I'll ask you about that next. I think it's fascinating. It was kind of tough to now get the deal done, right? Like many of us probably tuning in, terms and all that kind of stuff. I said, look, instead of just going back and forth on the phone calls and the conference call, let's just get in the car, sit like you and I are today, face to face, and do not leave Chicago until it happens if we're serious. And I think like the next day we were up there. We were up in a conference room and made it happen.
We stayed at the Hyatt, if you remember, and we went into the concierge room that afternoon.
Yeah, so there you go. That's how we bought EPI at a room inside of a Hyatt hotel.
Yeah, in Schaumburg.
And so let's talk about that deal. So what I also think it's fascinating. So obviously, Dad's always been an entrepreneur since for many years prior to buying EPI, but startup kind of entrepreneur. Now he certainly has bought companies when he was part of like the larger businesses and stuff. Yeah. But nonetheless, he now buys his first company. So what was that like? So now, signed, it's yours.
Yeah,
now what?
I was buying companies for my clients, right?
Yep.
And my advice to people, even to this day, somebody came up to me recently and asked me about a company. I always feel like it's better to buy an existing company and then put your spin on it.
Yeah.
Starting a company from scratch is so hard. It takes years of effort before you really start having any traction or making any money. If you buy an existing business that already has income, maybe it doesn't have a lot of income. EPI didn't have a lot of income, but it had some income.
Some foundation,
right?
A couple hundred.
Foundation. Yeah. It already had some clients, right? Yeah. It had some members.
Yeah.
It had some foundation. The SEPA program was in place.
Had rapport.
Right? There was a membership model. So what we wanted to do is buy it, and then because I had been a member for 4 years, and I had some pretty good advisors like Sean again. Sean and I were we had a lot of ideas, and I sort of knew what I wanted to do with it, right?
Yeah.
Once I owned it and how I would evolve it.
100%.
And so I always said, buy something that's existing so you have some foundation, and then put your spin on it. After that, and your scale up time is going to be a lot faster if you do that.
So now I'm going to take you in, and we're going to advance further, right? So father-son relationship. I can remember, too, it was like May. It was right after the SEPA program in May of 2014. So if anybody's tuning in live, and again, if you are turning in live, LinkedIn, Facebook, shoot me over the questions if you have some. I see a couple in. I'll try to circulate them in as we can, as much as we can. But now I want to take you to May 2014. We go, okay. And I remember you saying, like, Scott, my dad calls me Doc, is my nickname. That's probably a whole nother show. We go down a whole rabbit hole about why I'm Doc. But nonetheless, he says, Doc, you need to go in and run this thing. So we got to go in, move it from Chicago, where it still was, back to Cleveland, and you got to take over as basically the new executive director. Yeah. And I can always remember, for me, I was like, come on, Dad. Like, I mean, I was a landscaper, went to horticulture school. I was always like a little intimidated hanging out with the professional advisors, right? Highly educated kind of guys, kind of like how Dad's dressed today. Laughed when he came in here because I put on a collared shirt today for the show. Maybe next show I'll put on a T-shirt or something. But nonetheless, he goes, yeah, I got dressed up. But nonetheless, I remember you saying, hey, we're partners. I need you to go in and run this thing. So we moved me out of Aspire and basically, under your guidance, kind of took the reins as, I guess, what would have been the vice president was my title of the company.
Full-time on API.
And put me on full-time in July of 14. And for the audience, if you were around, man, it was I don't want to go as far as a train wreck, but, I can remember flash from 14 to, like, I guess that would have been September of 14, where I was in charge of our first conference. So he started the first conference, gave me the reins to run the conference. I lost $40,000 for us on that first conference because I didn't manage our room block. So like hotel attrition is a big thing for me. It's like my I live in fear of hotel attrition. But nonetheless, it was a learning experience. But the question I really have for you and for those of that run family business, what was it like working with your son now directly? Like, you're my boss, my partner, and screwing up things like the conference and trying to grow this thing. We're transitioning the business to Cleveland from Chicago. What's it like? And I mean, that time, I'm a pretty young dude.
Yeah, you're in your upper 20s at that point.
Right?
And I mean, when you started working at Aspire, I think you were 25, something like that. I mean, I think it goes back to one, we talk about personal vision. So here's a real case personal.
Yeah.
Like, I had a dream of working with you when I left the corporate world in 2006. I started Aspire, and you were in M&S at the time.
Yeah.
And I thought we could build this family enterprise together. And so it always starts with the vision, right? That's what I always say. It always starts with your vision, and that was my vision. I dreamed of having a family enterprise, right? That would go on potentially for generations. So that was the first motivation. The question, and then we were looking for things to buy, right? So that we could start to develop this thing. And if you remember, one of the pieces of advice I gave you is that when we were talking about exiting M&S Connection, the landscape company, I said to you, don't fall in love with this business.
That was my biggest,
Fall in love with business.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what business you own. Love business.
This was my first exit planning lesson. Yeah. My first exit planning lesson, I guess I didn't really call it exit planning right then, right? Because I wasn't hanging out every day with you.
Nobody did that.
But I had lost my identity, right? And that's when you said that to me, because I spent like those first because I sold it in the spring, right? So it's big season. We're mulching, we're planting. The grass is cutting twice a week, and it's the start of the season, right? And while I should have been working my ass off, I was kind of figuring out what to do with you.
Yeah.
And I realized, though, when you said that to me, it's a very good point, I think, for many business owners, is that don't let your business define you. And what I truly realized then is that it was true. I don't care if I'm running a professional education company, a consulting company, or a landscaping company. I love being an entrepreneur, but that was a great lesson.
Yeah, you're a business person first. Yeah. And so I felt like you were a good business person.
Yeah.
And so it was a question of just finding a business that you could sink your teeth into. And of course, if you remember, I wasn't crazy about us being in landscaping anyway. I mean, I said, there's got to be a better way to make money.
Yeah.
Like,
I remember him out with the snowblower. Remember, I had you out sometimes.
Ask Justin about that.
Justin Goodber will be on the show in a couple of weeks. But nonetheless,
there's got to be a better way.
There's got to be a better way.
Capital intensive. Equipment's always turning up. People aren't showing up for work. Come on over to the professional services line.
Sure.
and then you kind of cut your teeth by, dialing for dollars and recasting financial statements. And, you took to that really quick. So, I just thought, like, my feeling was that you're just a good business person. So let's find a business for you to run. And it took a couple of years working with Dennis Gano.
Yeah, right.
To kind of get a feel for EPI. And then within a couple of years, by 14, it was kind of like, okay, it's time for you to step up and take the operations and sales on this business, because
it was fun. It is fun. So I want to ask you a quick question, and then we're gonna take another quick break before we kind of wind everything down.
Okay.
But now we're on this journey, and I want to flash like another 10 years. So now we're 2022, 2023. Yeah. And we had a couple of questions come in around like the evolution of the actual designation, but really I want to keep it to not just the SEPA designation, but just the profession. Yeah. So you become a SEPA in 2008. Now we're sitting here 2022, 2023. Yeah. How has the profession or the market evolved from then?
Well, it wasn't a profession.
I guess it wasn't, right? It was like 100 people.
100 people.
Yeah.
Like, exit planning wasn't recognized as a profession.
Yeah, right.
People were doing it.
Yeah.
Like I was doing it, but I was calling it BIGS.
Yeah.
Wasn't recognized as a profession. There were three things that we felt in order to make it a profession that we needed to do. We needed to create awareness. Right?
Sure.
We needed to foster better team play, and we needed a process.
Right.
That, if you remember, those were the three things we said. Yeah. Those became our pillars when we bought EPI. We said, look, that's what we got to do. If we just make people aware of the importance of this, right?
Yeah.
Most business owners don't do it because they don't know how.
Sure.
But once you show them, like, here's what's at stake, and here's the methodology, here's the process, it's actually not just a business. It's a holistic way to live your life.
Right.
Like, you just see the light bulbs go on. So, you ask, don't tell, right?
Yep.
You educate, don't sell.
Exactly right. Yeah. So I want to take a quick break. We're going to wind down the show and talk a little bit to Chris when we come back about his new book, Walking to Destiny 2.0, releases here in just a couple of months in March. And I want to just have him conclude with how has value acceleration, not as an advisor, but as a business owner, how has that affected your life? So give me a quick 2 minutes.
Get ready to uncover innovative solutions, build deeper relationships, and share transformational experiences at the Exit Planning Summit this May in Scottsdale, Arizona. The summit is the world's largest exit planning-centric event, bringing together professional advisors and their teams from around the globe. It is the premier conference for people committed to working with business owners, accelerating business value, aligning personal and financial strategies for the business owners, and collaborating with the top professionals in the market today. The transformative experience does not stop when the sessions end. Immerse yourself in a distinctive lifestyle experience that transcends expectation. Join us at the magnificent Five Diamond Resort, the Phoenician, the premier luxury hotel in Scottsdale. Immerse yourself in breathtaking views, impeccable service, and unparalleled amenities. Curate a distinctive resort experience infused with a retreat-like ambiance that transforms your well-being. Learn more and reserve your spot now at www.exitplanningsummit.com.
All right, everybody, we're back on the Exit Is Now podcast with me and my dad, Chris, for our debut episode. So last segment, I kind of want to wind down the last 40, 45 minutes with everybody and now switch, right? We've basically spent the last 40 minutes talking to you about you as an advisor and now you as an educator through Exit Planning Institute. But I think, although I think Chris kind of puts himself in those buckets too, I think the biggest bucket you put yourself in is business owner. And so before we kind of dive into what it means to be an owner, I want to ask you about Walking to Destiny 2.0, right? So original Walking to Destiny we talked about. It's certainly here on the table. But the industry has evolved. You kind of alluded to that in our last segment. So, you spent almost all of last year creating the second version of Walking to Destiny, which I think is a hell of a book. I think that it's even better than, honestly, even better than the first book. And we've gone from like 300 SEPAs to almost 5,000 SEPAs really since that book was released.
Yep.
So kind of just a couple minutes, just kind of sum up like why the new book and what should we all expect?
Well, first of all, you never stop learning, right? So, I got into this in 2008. It's now 2023. I wrote WTD1 in 2016. That's only half of my career.
It's true.
So there's a whole nother half of my career in exit planning that's reflected in this new book. And so it reflects everything I've learned in the last 7-8 years. There's some things that we teach today that aren't even in the first book,
Right.
We've expanded it. We've updated the market data. The biggest dynamic that I see going on right now is that the boomers are not in the driver's seat anymore. They've been in the driver's seat for 70 years.
Yeah, it's starting to change.
It's not starting. It is changing. And so there's a new owner out there. They're younger. They're more educated. They're more aware. They're more dynamic. They're more holistic thinking. Mm-hmm. And so part of what this was written for is for them. Now, I'm not forgetting the boomers. They still own 51% of the privately held businesses, but it's down from 67% 10 years ago. And if you look 10 years forward, what's going to happen? These younger generation owners, these Gen Xers and millennials will be taking over, driving social and economic values. And the book needs to reflect this new ownership.
Yeah. Well, 100%. I remember us sitting, it would have been, over a year ago now, November of 21, sitting there saying, what are the strategic initiatives for next year? And one of them was, for everybody who's a reader of Walking to Destiny, read that first section, it was kind of focused on the boomer. Yeah. But to Chris's point, I think it's a huge point and I think it's one of the ones maybe in that next generation that I'm most passionate about. I do think our most immediate market still is the baby boomer business owner, as Chris talked about, average age 67, 69. We need to help them successfully and significantly exit. But while we're doing that and using them almost as a case study or as a showcase, we will be showing a whole new generation of owners, people in their early 50s, 40s, 30s, maybe even in their 20s, a way to live a more value acceleration-centric lifestyle, which is balanced, which is a good, significant business that has a prosperous and fulfilling exit at some time, that during the life cycles of the company are very balanced. I want to, and really, I think that's the essence of kind of Walking to Destiny, right? The first chapter introduces the new generations. Throughout the book, we evolve the methodology a little bit. We had and kind of in our closing, we had a couple questions come in, and I think an interesting one. They said, after listening to you guys for the last 45 or so minutes, hearing about Chris's career really since 2006 and starting Aspire Management, family business owner, advisor, creator of methodology author, what is your hardest lesson that you've learned over that stretch of, something like 15 plus years?
Yeah, the thing that pops into mind, I don't know if this is the hard, but the first thing that popped in my mind is stay true to your core principles.
Of course.
And that's, you're going to be challenged.
Yep.
You're going to be challenged to compromise on that.
Yep.
You believe in what you believe. There was no exit planning industry, but we believed in it, and I believed in this.
Yeah,
and
it's true.
I think, just stay true to it's hard to stay true to your core principles, even when it means sometimes you got to take a loss,
Yeah.
And I think that's the hardest lesson to learn. Every time I venture off of that, we all do, it ends up being a disaster.
Yeah, it's
don't
never right.
Go away from your core principles. If you don't have a set of core values, core principles, find out what you really believe in and follow that passion.
That's great. I think that it's a great point, too. Chris challenged us with that, too, and I guess through the pandemic, right? Because we're all kind of reinvestigating who we are in such a kind of crazy time. But, and EPI rewrote their core values, too. So I want to get to value acceleration because for our listeners, I'm going to have Chris on throughout the year because, again, the show's really about introducing value acceleration as we use it as business owners. So in our closing, Chris, I'd love for you to talk or allude to the audience a little bit about what it means to have value acceleration in your life. How has your own methodology as an owner, as a family business owner, how has it helped you since 2012, since me and you bought EPI and have built this company?
Well, one of the things that I think that makes the methodology attractive is it's based on real life. And, we live it here.
Every day.
Every day. Your book's going to be Growing Up Through Value Acceleration. But one of the things you wrote about, and by the way, one of the things Scott contributed in this book much more significantly than he did in the last one, and in the chapter that you wrote, chapter 14, you talk about living this value acceleration-centric life.
Yeah.
And that really hit home for me because that's really what we're talking about. This isn't a quick fix. This isn't a Band-Aid. This isn't like some, scheme.
No, it's not a two or 3 month process.
What we're talking about here is living a holistic life driven by personal, financial, and business value systems, right? That's what we're talking about. And so for me, it's helped me achieve a more holistic life, personally, financially. It's helped to show me how I need to get myself prepared. I mean, we've already gotten some benefits from our estate planning.
Estate planning.
This year we had some definite benefits from a personal standpoint. It's helped me grow personally. It's kept me in balance with my business life. My business life has not taken over my personal life.
Right.
Our family's all involved in this.
Yep.
So it's helped me live a more holistic life. And I just feel for most people, they would say, not to get too cheesy on it, but it makes you a happier person when you live a more holistic life.
It does. Well, everybody, that's all the time that we have today. Dad, really appreciate you coming in on the show. And so recording for the show for everybody listening live will be out on Monday on all your platforms: Spotify, Audible, Apple, Google, iHeart, all the cool platforms. Next show live airs every other Wednesday, so we'll be back live Wednesday, January 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time with two people that, in fact, advise me and Chris, so our own certified exit planning advisors. We'll introduce you to Sean Hutchinson, who sat next to Chris in class in 2008 in the SEPA program, is a more veteran-style SEPA, saw value acceleration introduced to the market, and is a personal advisor to me and Chris and our team here at EPI, certainly has an impact. And another gentleman that has had a major impact, particularly even on me, Justin Goodbread, also a SEPA since 2017 or 18, most recent exit planner of the year. Both these gentlemen will join me back here, and the Exit Is Now studio from Cleveland, Ohio, back on Wednesday, or up on Wednesday, the 25th at 1 p.m. With that, guys, we'll see you.